Imagine the profound impact if withdrawing your presence became your most potent action in someone's perception. Consider the moment you cease the pursuit, the explanations, the efforts to validate yourself in her eyes, and instead, you simply release your grip. You don't fade into oblivion, you etch yourself indelibly into memory. Genuine, intentional silence possesses a resonant power. It doesn't just fill a gap, it creates a significant void that echoes long after the initial quiet settles. This stillness lingers, carving out mental space within another person's thoughts, space previously occupied by the clamor of expectation or the noise of your overt efforts. While it may seem counterintuitive initially, the human mind is inherently drawn towards what is absent, towards the unanswered questions, the unexplained gaps, the captivating enigma. When you step back, not driven by resentment or malice, but by a cultivated inner peace, you aren't merely establishing distance. You are fostering depth. You are not desperately seeking attention, you are commanding a quiet, undeniable presence. In that calm detachment, a quality Stoic philosophers understood deeply as a focus on one's internal state rather than external outcomes, she begins to experience something entirely new. Your absence, imbued with self-possession, carries a gravity and significance that your words, however earnest, never achieved. So many men expend their vital energy striving relentlessly to demonstrate their adequacy. They inundate with messages, they overanalyze and over-articulate their feelings and intentions, they compromise their own energetic equilibrium merely to be acknowledged, to be seen as enough. Yet, a man truly accesses his innate power the instant he relinquishes the need for external validation and firmly reclaims the understanding that he is already complete, inherently worthy. This realization doesn't hinge on her affirmation or anyone else's opinion, it takes root because he has finally affirmed it for himself, a core principle of self-mastery and virtue that Stoicism emphasizes. This isn't about engaging in calculated maneuvers or psychological tricks. It transcends superficial gamesmanship. It is fundamentally about profound self-awareness. It is about making a conscious, deliberate choice to prioritize your own well-being and integrity, not with boastful conceit, but with clear-eyed clarity and unwavering purpose. When a man walks away from a situation or interaction with serenity settled in his core and a tranquil steadiness reflected in his gaze, grounded in his inner citadel, he doesn't necessarily lose the other person in the way one might anticipate. Instead, he provides her with an unprecedented opportunity to perceive him genuinely, stripped of the usual distractions and the distracting noise of his former efforts. And gradually, day after quiet day, a subtle yet profound shift begins to take hold within her. The silence he embodies transforms into a probing mirror reflecting her own patterns and expectations. His absence evolves into a persistent, unanswered question in her mind. The man who might have previously felt like a constant, perhaps taken for granted presence, suddenly becomes the central, unavoidable figure in her mental landscape. This process illustrates the power of focusing solely on what is within one's control, one's own state of being, and letting go of the outcome, an intrinsically Stoic practice. Let's explore the progression within her mind, day by day, when you implement this intentional withdrawal with dignity, when you stop chasing externalities and start embodying your own internal strength and value. This path is for those who appreciate the quiet strength of inner resilience over manufactured drama, authentic purpose over fragile ego, and the enduring wisdom of self-possession over the clamor of external validation. It's a journey towards power that doesn't require shouting to be recognized. It resonates quietly, deeply. The unfolding process. Day 1 unfolds, and outwardly, she doesn't outwardly react. There is no discernible flinch. On this initial day, your absence does not appear to visibly perturb her composure. She seems calm, collected, even bordering on nonchalance. She registers the cessation of contact, certainly, but it's akin to noticing a song gradually fading into the background, present, perhaps, but not disruptive to the established rhythm of her existence. This initial calm often stems from deeply ingrained patterns. Many individuals, particularly women accustomed to being pursued, have been conditioned to anticipate that attention, however withdrawn momentarily, will inevitably resurface. They expect it to return, sometimes through relentless persistence, at other times through overt desperation. Consequently, when your silence commences, she may rationalize it as merely another phase in a predictable cycle. Perhaps you are occupied. Perhaps you are attempting to pique her interest by playing hard to get. Perhaps you are simply one among many who feign unavailability only to ultimately revert to seeking her favor. She does not succumb to immediate alarm or confusion regarding your whereabouts. Not yet. This is because she operates under the assumption that she understands the conclusion of this narrative. She believes she has witnessed this scenario before. However, what she fails to grasp is the fundamental difference this time. This period of silence is not a calculated performance designed to elicit a specific reaction. You are not deliberately withholding communication as a tactic to generate emotional tension or make her pine for you. Rather, you have simply made the conscious, reasoned decision to cease investing your valuable energy where it was not met with genuine receptivity or appreciation. This withdrawal is not about establishing dominance or manipulating the dynamic. It is born from a place of profound inner peace, a tranquility that arises when a man, anchored in Stoic self-reliance, no longer seeks validation from external sources but instead governs his actions and emotional state according to his own internal code of values and reason. And this distinction is precisely what renders this situation unique. This is not merely the commencement of a new emotional game. From your perspective, it signifies the conclusion of the old one, the one predicated on chasing external approval. She does not react initially because she has not yet truly perceived the underlying shift, the transformation happening not in the external dynamic, but within the very core of your being. And soon, the silence she initially dismissed as insignificant will resonate with an echo she finds increasingly impossible to disregard. By the second or third day, a subtle alteration begins to register. Something feels different, subtly off. It's not a dramatic or overtly alarming sensation, but a quiet void where your consistent presence once resided. You had been a steady, reliable fixture, not excessively available, certainly, but grounded and present when it mattered. Now, that presence is simply absent. There is no explanatory message, no casual update, no visible reaction to her own online activity, just an expansive space and an unwavering silence. Outwardly, she still maintains composure. She does not panic. She intellectually assures herself that it is inconsequential, that you are likely busy or perhaps just taking a temporary step back. She might even attempt to persuade herself that this newfound space is refreshing, granting her a sense of the upper hand in the dynamic. But beneath this composed exterior, her mind has already begun to subtly probe the edges of your absence. She may find herself reviewing your past conversations, perhaps seeking a lingering connection, a digital tether to confirm your continued relevance in her world. She might check your online profile, not with the intention of initiating contact, but merely to verify your continued existence, to confirm you are still around. But you are not around in the manner she expects, not in the way she has become accustomed to. It is then that the quiet begins to deepen its hold, to grow roots in her consciousness. A small, almost imperceptible seed of uncertainty takes root. This is not yet the pang of longing or missing you in a sentimental way. That emotional state typically develops later. This phase is more nuanced. It is the dawning sense that something has fundamentally shifted, and she lacks the immediate clarity to articulate precisely what it is. She is unsure if her actions played a role, or even if she occupies any space in your current thoughts. This ambiguity, this lack of a clear narrative or predictable response, unsettling her in a manner that direct, explicit rejection never could. You are no longer adhering to the script she had mentally prepared, and the unknown, the unpredictable action rooted in genuine internal freedom, is invariably more compelling and powerful than the expected response. In these initial days, by consciously doing nothing in relation to her or the previous dynamic, you paradoxically begin to communicate everything about your changed internal state. And though she may not acknowledge it consciously yet, a fundamental question has already begun to echo persistently in the quiet recesses of her mind. What if he has genuinely withdrawn? This quiet action, for the man practicing it, is an exercise in stoic patience and non-reactivity, focusing on his own actions and inner state rather than seeking to manage or influence hers. By the fourth or fifth day, your absence transitions from something she can easily dismiss to something she viscerally begins to feel. This isn't about dramatic, overt moments of missing you, but rather a subtle presence felt in the quiet, interstitial moments of her ordinary routines. She finds herself reaching for her phone more frequently, not driven by overt urgency, but by a quiet, almost subconscious hope that your name might appear in her notifications. She intellectually dismisses this behavior as mere habit or fleeting curiosity. However, the burgeoning truth is that your consistent silence is now actively occupying mental and emotional space within her. Certain songs she might previously have enjoyed are now avoided, not because of a change in musical preference, but because they evoke a disruptive sense of nostalgia, too strongly reminding her of the comfort she experienced when your presence was a steady, reliable fixture, when she didn't have to ponder your feelings or wonder where you stood in her life. The evenings begin to stretch, feeling noticeably longer. The palpable weight of your absence settles most heavily during those in-between periods, the lulls in conversation with friends, the minutes just before drifting off to sleep when no one texts her a good-night message, leaving her alone with only her circulating thoughts. She had presumed you would yield, that by this point, like countless men before you within her experience, you would send some form of communication, any message, to subtly or overtly remind her that she still retained the perceived power in the dynamic. But you have not. You remain resolutely silent, steadfastly still. And this unwavering composure, this lack of expected reaction, unnerves her far more profoundly than any expression of anger or frustration ever could. Your silence is not a manipulative stratagem, it is not mere noise disguised as cunning. It is a deliberate, composed state of being, imbued with genuine significance because it stems from a place of internal grounding. In this stillness, she begins to perceive something that resonates more loudly than any spoken words, the unspoken declaration of a man who no longer feels the inherent need to chase external validation, a man whose sense of worth is anchored firmly within himself. And though she may resist admitting it, even privately, the profound weight of this realization has already initiated a transformation deep within her. Because now, the comfortable certainty she once held about the predetermined outcome of this story has irrevocably dissolved. This is the Stoic lesson of focusing on your own conduct and inner state, allowing the outcome to be indifferent, which paradoxically creates a powerful impact. By the 6th or 7th day, an internal shift within her begins to manifest in ways she had not anticipated. This isn't merely about missing you in the conventional, wistful sense, the kind she might confess over a glass of wine weeks or months later. This experience is distinctly different, it is deeper, more fundamental. It revolves around control, the perceived control she believed she possessed, the control that once bolstered her confidence, and which is now visibly, unsettlingly eroding. According to the established patterns she understood, you were never intended to maintain this silence for such an extended period. You were expected to react, to capitulate, to initiate contact, perhaps something small, seemingly insignificant, but something nonetheless. Instead, you have maintained a state of quietude, centeredness, and imperturbability. And that unwavering steadiness, that calm adherence to your internal position, is beginning to dismantle fundamental assumptions she held, assumptions so deeply ingrained she hadn't even consciously acknowledged them. Intrusive, unwelcome, and stubbornly unresolved questions begin to surface repeatedly in her mind. Did I fundamentally misinterpret him? Was his interest in me less significant than I believed? Or, a more unsettling possibility, has he already moved on with someone else entirely? These are not inquiries she articulates aloud. They remain locked within the silence of her own thoughts, tangled and replaying in the private, often turbulent, spaces of her consciousness. But they echo, again and again, and with each return, their resonance grows louder, more insistent. It is not solely your physical absence that preoccupies her thoughts. It is the unfamiliar, almost unsettling calm that surrounds it. You are not expressing anger or resentment. You are not displaying bitterness or engaging in retaliatory tactics. You have simply, decisively removed yourself from the dynamic without dramatic fanfare, without lengthy explanations or justifications. This deliberate, reasoned withdrawal, this lack of emotional reactivity, is what disturbs her most profoundly. You are not actively seeking a response from her or attempting to provoke a reaction. You are simply living your life, fully engaged, focused on your own purpose, and entirely free from the perceived need to justify your value or prove anything through external interaction. And that stark reality, rooted in your self-sufficiency, pierces through her defenses and her pride. Because for the first time in this dynamic, she is not merely wondering about your physical location or activities. She is fundamentally questioning her own perceived significance within your world. This is not because you have diminished her in any way, but because you have demonstrated something profoundly rare, a man who embodies such inner strength and self-possession that he does not require external validation or her attention to feel whole and complete. That level of authentic peace and internal integrity cannot be simulated, and once perceived, it is impossible to ignore. By this stage, days 8 through 10, the silence has transformed from a distant, abstract absence into something that actively occupies the space she inhabits. It accompanies her, a quiet, persistent presence, in moments where she previously felt most secure and insulated, in the midst of conversations with others, during her casual scrolling through social media feeds, and particularly in the solitary hours just before she yields to sleep. It is no longer merely something she passively notices, it is a tangible sensation she actively feels. She finds herself compulsively searching for subtle signs, any indication that she still registers within your sphere of awareness. Did you view her online story? Did you react to an old photograph? Were you tagged in a location geographically close enough to allow her the comforting illusion that she might still occasionally cross your mind? But the consistent, unwavering answer, time and again, is the absence of any such signs. There is nothing. You have disappeared, not with the turbulence of a storm, but with the profound quietude of true stillness. And that stillness, rooted in your inner peace, is a more potent and resonant form of communication than any direct confrontation or emotional outburst could ever achieve. She attempts to maintain a facade of composure, perhaps even feigning amusement or indifference regarding your disappearance. She tells herself you are merely engaging in a predictable game, patiently waiting for her to react, to make the first move. However, as the silence persists and the days accumulate, it becomes increasingly difficult to ignore the uncomfortable, growing truth. This is not a game designed to draw her back in. You are not deliberately baiting her or holding your breath in anticipation of her notice. You have simply, intentionally, and unequivocally chosen silence, not wielded as a weapon against her, but established as a firm boundary, a declaration of your own internal state and values. And this fundamental truth is what unsettles her most deeply. For the first time, she experiences an emotion she genuinely did not expect: regret. This regret is not triggered by anything you have said or done. You have not begged for a second chance or pleaded your case. It arises precisely because you didn't do those things, because you withdrew with a form of quiet dignity and self-respect she is fundamentally unaccustomed to witnessing in this context. The realization, slow and unavoidable, begins to sink in. This is the genuine experience of a man who ceases to chase, not out of a desire to inflict punishment, but because he has finally, profoundly reconnected with and remembered his own intrinsic worth. And in that act of remembering, in grounding himself in his own value, he became, paradoxically, unreachable, not by physical distance or emotional walls, but by an unassailable inner peace. And that level of peace doesn't just momentarily trouble her, it permeates and lingers, casting a shadow over every moment of quietude she previously found comforting or innocuous. This is the Stoic practice of prioritizing your inner state, peace, self-worth, above external outcomes or validation. Around days 11 to 14, something shifts noticeably when she looks at her own reflection. It's subtle initially, perhaps a slightly longer pause before the mirror, a fleeting, undefinable flicker of emotion in her eyes. But as the period of silence lengthens, her thoughts increasingly circle back to you, not driven by frustration or resentment, but by a quiet, introspective questioning. She begins to replay your past conversations meticulously in her mind. Words she might have previously dismissed or overlooked now resonate differently, echoing with unexpected significance in the quiet space your absence has created. Moments where she reacted with laughter or deliberately created emotional distance now feel starkly colder, harsher in the light of hindsight. She finds herself pondering if she fundamentally missed something crucial, or, more troubling, if she carelessly disregarded something that held genuine importance to you and the potential connection. The inherent irony is that she still consciously believes she holds the dominant position. She thinks she is actively choosing not to initiate contact. However, deep within her, that perceived sense of control is demonstrably eroding. This is because, for the first time, she is not certain of her own judgment or position. She cannot distinguish how much of your sustained silence is a deliberate, calculated tactic and how much of it is simply the genuine, sincere reflection of your current internal state, a state of detachment from the previous dynamic. And here lies the most impactful revelation: you are not engaging in any of this to intentionally provoke her or orchestrate a grand emotional reversal in her feelings. You are not sitting by your phone, anxiously anticipating her reaction or desperately hoping that she notices your absence and feels its impact. You are not trying to be missed. You are simply living your life, focused, grounded, and truly at peace within yourself. You have consciously redirected your valuable energy and attention towards pursuits that genuinely nourish and strengthen you: your professional growth, your physical well-being, your personal purpose and passions. You have effectively stepped off the emotional battlefield of seeking external validation and have deliberately moved towards something infinitely more powerful and sustainable: profound self-respect. And whether she consciously acknowledges it or not, she undeniably senses this fundamental shift within you. Because nothing challenges and unnerves the ego more profoundly than witnessing another person genuinely thriving, operating from a place of inherent value without the slightest need to prove their worth to anyone else. She is no longer primarily focused on the question of if or when you might return. She is beginning, for the first time, to genuinely ponder if you ever, in truth, needed her in the way she presumed you did. And in the face of that unsettling uncertainty, the comforting narrative she had constructed about your dynamic, the story she believed she was confidently writing, begins to lose its shape and coherence. This focus on self, on virtue, and on living according to one's own principles regardless of external circumstances is a hallmark of practical Stoicism. By days 15 through 17, the void created by your consistent silence has become too significant, too expansive, to be easily ignored or rationalized away. It continues to linger and resonate in the very spaces where your voice, your casual updates, your passing comments, and your subtle affirmations of presence once fit so naturally into her daily life. And although she has diligently attempted to persuade herself that your absence is inconsequential, something fundamental within her is undeniably undergoing a significant transformation. Her ingrained pride, her ego, still urges her to maintain a facade of composure, to project the illusion of indifference. However, a competing force, potent curiosity, has begun to exert its pull, gently at first, then with a quiet, growing desperation. She experiences an increasing urge to initiate contact, not with a direct confession or a plea, but with something deliberately small, something she can easily frame as casual or accidental. This might manifest as a vague online post that could be interpreted in multiple ways, a line from a song shared without explicit context, or a carefully curated online story featuring a memory she knows you shared. Perhaps she posts a picture where her smile appears almost genuine, except for the subtle, telling way her eyes betray the underlying ache of uncertainty. Her hope is that these indirect signals will be sufficient to stir a reaction from you, to serve as a reminder that she still occupies at least some fragment of space in your thoughts. Yet, you maintain your stillness. Drawing upon the Stoic practice of focusing only on what is within your control, your actions, your responses, and remaining indifferent to external outcomes, her attempts to provoke a reaction, you offer nothing in return. There are no likes, no messages, no subtle signs of acknowledgement that you have registered her attempts. And this deliberate, consistent absence of reaction cuts far deeper than any harsh word or emotional outburst ever could. This is because it is not driven by anger or fueled by emotional reactivity. It is deliberate, clean, and almost surgical in its precision. It compels her to confront a stark reality she has long and skillfully avoided. She is no longer in control of this dynamic. And the most challenging truth for her to internalize is that she never genuinely possessed that control to begin with. She had mistakenly interpreted your kindness, your genuine presence, and your willingness to invest energy as a sign of neediness on your part, or mistook your presence for a guarantee of relentless pursuit. But now, in the unwavering reflection of your stillness, she begins to perceive you clearly, perhaps for the very first time. And that profound realization is not merely a fleeting discomfort, it is a truly humbling experience for her ego. At this advanced stage, days 18 through 20, the silence no longer feels like an impersonal space or a neutral void. It has taken on the tangible weight of loss. It subtly infiltrates the peripheral moments of her day and settles heavily in the quietest hours of the night. She is no longer simply pondering where you have gone or why, she is actively beginning to fear that you are not, in fact, returning. And for the first time, that apprehension feels not like a hypothetical possibility, but a real, heavy, immediate prospect. She begins to introduce your name or topics related to you into conversations, initially subtly, just enough to make it seem like a casual, passing mention. Yet, her voice betrays her underlying tension, a noticeable pause, a subtle strain in her tone that was entirely absent before. And when she is alone, the carefully constructed facade of denial begins to crumble. She finds herself compulsively scrolling through your online profile in the middle of the night, searching for any sign, any fleeting trace that you might still feel something that she no longer perceives in your silence. She lingers for too long on photographs of you smiling, images that once filled her with a comforting sense of being chosen. Now, they prompt her to question if she ever truly perceived you as you are, or merely a carefully constructed version she desperately wished to believe in. A quiet, internal unraveling is occurring beneath her composed surface. The comforting narrative she once held dear, the belief that you were fortunate to have her, that you would inevitably return seeking reconnection, that she held the dominant influence, begin to systematically collapse. And in their place, a sobering, undeniable truth emerges. You were never engaged in a competition for dominance. You were not chasing her attention or approval. You were simply offering something profoundly rare and valuable, genuine presence, consistent, steady energy, and authentic respect, rooted in your own internal strength and self-regard. And when that offering was not met with a commensurate level of care, reciprocity, or appreciation, you did not react with anger, frustration, or manipulative tactics. You simply, clearly, and decisively withdrew. There was no unnecessary drama, no lengthy explanations or justifications, just a profound clarity. And now she perceives it not as a deliberate punishment directed at her, but as an established, unwavering boundary, a standard of interaction, not merely a fleeting tactic. She had mistakenly believed herself to be the ultimate prize in the dynamic. But now, in the wake of your self-possessed withdrawal, she begins to realize that what you were offering, that genuine, steady presence born of inner fortitude, may have been the true rarity all along. This realization aligns with the Stoic understanding that true value lies in one's own virtuous state and actions, independent of how others perceive or reciprocate. By days 21 through 25, the sustained silence has effectively dismantled the comforting narrative she once told herself about your dynamic. The illusion of her absolute control has dissipated, replaced by a growing sense of urgency. This isn't yet overt desperation, but something more measured, more calculated. She begins to visibly adjust her approach. The sharp, effortless edges of her former confidence start to soften. Her tone when interacting with others, or perhaps in subtle ways directed potentially towards you, changes. Her general demeanor becomes more considered, more deliberately curated. She no longer simply desires to be seen by you again, she yearns for you to perceive her in the specific way you once seemed to before your profound silence became a more resonant form of communication than any words exchanged. She might craft and send a message designed to appear accidental, strategically ambiguous enough to be easily dismissed as a mistake if it is ignored, yet containing just enough potential meaning to pique interest. She might arrange to casually appear in locations she knows you frequent, perhaps laughing a little louder than necessary, positioning herself slightly closer to the version of herself she believes is most likely to recapture your attention. She might even initiate contact with something seemingly insignificant, a trivial question easily answerable through a quick search, or a shared memory she knows you both recall, merely as a pretext to reopen a channel of communication. However, this marks a crucial shift in the dynamic, one rooted in your internal transformation. You no longer readily step through doors left casually ajar. Drawing on Stoic discernment, you do not confuse mere physical proximity with genuine emotional connection, nor do you equate superficial familiarity with profound meaning. And this is precisely why you do not eagerly seize the opportunity to respond. Your non-response is not born of bitterness or lingering anger, emotions the Stoics sought to master. It is a state of continued stillness, grounded composure, and an unwavering clarity that is no longer easily swayed by old habits or external cues. You are not engaging in the manipulative tactic of playing hard to get. You have simply, through a process of internal growth and the cultivation of self-respect, genuinely outgrown the need for such games. Your calm presence, your unwavering internal center, is deeply unsettling to her, not because it is cruel or dismissive, but because it is genuinely rare. She anticipated either clear resistance or inevitable surrender from you. What she did not anticipate, and what she struggles to comprehend, is a state of profound indifference rooted in authentic inner peace, the Stoic ideal of ataraxia in relation to external things. And that, more than anything else, shakes her perceived foundation. Because she can feel it now in a way she could not before, you are not passively waiting for her or reacting to her maneuvers. You have fundamentally moved on within yourself. And nothing is more disarming or powerfully impactful than a man who has cultivated such internal completeness that he no longer requires external validation or even comprehension to remain whole and self-possessed. At this juncture, days 26 through 30, the prolonged silence has accomplished more than simply establishing physical or emotional distance. It has created a powerful, undeniable contrast. The absence of your consistent attention, your reliable presence, the familiar investment of your energy, it is no longer merely an intellectual mystery she is attempting to decipher. It has become something she experiences deeply and profoundly, something that lingers persistently in her thoughts and touches aspects of her emotional landscape she did not anticipate would be stirred by your withdrawal. She is no longer simply curious about where you might have gone or what you might be doing. She has become genuinely and fully invested in understanding why your absence feels so profoundly different and impactful compared to any previous departure she might have experienced. The vague online posts, the seemingly accidental messages, the subtle, passive tests of your attention are gone. In their place comes something more authentic, more intentional. She initiates contact, this time often without the facade of casualness, without the performance. There is a palpable vulnerability in her voice, perhaps a softness in her words that was absent before your withdrawal. This is not necessarily a calculated strategy to win you back through charm or manipulation. For the first time in this dynamic, she is communicating without the underlying assumption that you are merely waiting in the wings. She is hoping, genuinely hoping, for a positive response. And now, the fundamental dynamic quietly, undeniably shifts. The focus is no longer on whether you will respond out of habit or expectation. It has become whether she still warrants a place at your metaphorical table, whether she has, through her own introspection and changed understanding, earned the right to be welcomed back into a space of genuine connection that you no longer offer indiscriminately. This is because your absence was not merely a lack of communication, it served as a powerful mirror. It clearly reflected back to her what she once casually took for granted, what she assumed would always be readily available regardless of her own actions or reciprocity. And now that it is gone, she understands on a deeper level that it was not merely casual or easily replaceable. It possessed a significance that, in retrospect, feels akin to something sacred. You, on your part, are also fundamentally changed by this process. You are not hardened or bitter. Such emotional reactivity would run counter to the inner peace you've cultivated. You are simply clear. Clear on the value of your time and energy. Clear on the inherent worth of your tranquility and internal composure. Clear that your intrinsic value is not, and never was, contingent upon her validation or approval. While this was always the underlying truth, you now perceive and embody it with profound clarity. Her message, regardless of its apparent sincerity at this moment, does not erase the process you have undergone. It does not undo the journey you took within yourself during these days and weeks of deliberate stillness. And so, you pause before responding, not as a form of punishment or control, but as an act of protection, safeguarding the inner peace and self-respect you have painstakingly cultivated. Because what was once freely and perhaps casually given must now be approached with the same reverence and intentionality you have established in your own life. She is no longer merely seeking a reaction or a sign of life. She is asking for a genuine reconnection. But the critical difference now lies in who holds the power of decision. And that decision is no longer driven by fleeting desire or external pressure. It is rooted in fundamental alignment with your values, your state of being, and the standards you have set for your own life. You have learned, through the practice of quiet self-possession, that your worth was never something she or anyone else could bestow upon you or take away. It was always, inherently, yours. And now, you carry that understanding not as a burden, but as the undeniable truth of a man who has finally, profoundly remembered what it truly means to be whole and complete within himself, regardless of external relationships or validation. In conclusion, the act of intentionally withdrawing is frequently profoundly misunderstood. It is not a tactical maneuver, and it is certainly not a superficial game of manipulation. It is not fundamentally about punishment, control, or seeking external power over another. When undertaken from a place of calm clarity, rooted in self-respect and an understanding of what lies within one's control, one's own state, and what does not, the other's reaction, a truly Stoic perspective, it transcends simple absence and becomes something far more significant and revealing. It transforms into a mirror, held up not just to the other person, but primarily to oneself. And in that mirror, she does not simply perceive the physical space where you once stood. She is compelled to see herself, her ingrained patterns, her inherent pride, the unspoken expectations she carried without ever pausing to question if they were genuinely earned, the attention she perhaps presumed was an inalienable right, the sense of control she mistakenly assumed she possessed in the dynamic. But the most profound and lasting gift of this intentional silence, from a Stoic perspective, is not found in what it ultimately reveals to her, but in the crucial insights it unveils within you. When you consciously step back from the relentless noise of seeking approval, from the compulsion to constantly prove your value, from the old, ingrained habits of overextending yourself and compromising your energy merely to be seen or chosen, you finally encounter yourself again. You reconnect with the man you were, or are meant to become, before you inadvertently placed your sense of self-worth and emotional equilibrium into someone else's hands, making them responsible for your internal state. You begin to truly see your strength not in your capacity to relentlessly pursue or attempt to fix the dynamic, but in your profound ability to remain still, grounded in the present moment, and authentically self-led. And once you arrive at that place of internal fortitude, once a man stands fully and unapologetically in the complete truth of who he is, recognizing his intrinsic value, he no longer seeks permission from others to be valued. He no longer feels compelled to perform or contort himself for acceptance or approval. He no longer needs to beg others to remember him or acknowledge his existence. Because the man who has truly remembered and reclaimed who he is fundamentally understands this truth. If someone appears to forget him, it is often because they were never truly seeing him for who he is in the first place. They were seeing an external projection or their own expectation. Have you ever deliberately withdrawn from a connection with someone, truly stepped back without the presence of anger or the intention of playing manipulative games, only to witness a significant and unexpected shift in their behavior or the dynamic? Or perhaps you have experienced the common misstep of reaching out prematurely, driven by a desire to reconnect, only to be met with a disappointing reality and a subsequent, lingering sense of regret. If you recognize yourself in these experiences, understand that you are not alone. These moments are a common part of the male journey in navigating relationships and self-worth. Many men have lived through these dynamics, some processing them in quiet solitude, others carrying the lessons deeply etched into their personal history. Your experiences hold valuable insights. What occurred when you ceased showing up in the way she had come to expect? What did you feel internally when you maintained your boundary and held the line of silence, or conversely, when you chose to break it? Share your story.